Gun shops are booming. Shelves that once sat still are now cleared before lunch. Everything from lever guns to red dots is vanishing faster than distributors can restock. What's behind the surge? Why are Americans swarming gun stores in record numbers when there's no ban on the table and no panic in the headlines? In this video, we'll talk about the real reasons why Trump's 2025 policies have set off the biggest sales spike we've seen in years. You'll see how confidence, not chaos, is changing the way gun owners buy, train, and invest. Rifle racks are telling a new story this spring. The latest scope shipment data show bolt actions and lever guns moving fast. Shipments for all rifles jumped 7.5% in the first quarter compared with the same stretch 2 years ago. Lever guns alone now claim nearly a quarter of that traffic after decades in the single digits. That's proof buyers are snapping up everything from modern ported 45-70 government to classic 30-30s as soon as a distributor drops a pallet. Handgun counters echo the trend, but with a twist. The humble wheel gun is roaring back. Retailers who used to keep one lonely J-frame in the case now dedicate whole shelves to 35-7 and 38 models, because first-time owners keep asking for something simple that just works. Articles aimed at dealers advise stocking revolvers again because the margin is finally worth it. New shooters find the simplicity of the manual operation less intimidating than the complexity of striker pistols' malfunctions charts. Sales heat spills into glass cases full of micro-compacts. The Shield Plus, GX4, and Glock 43X vanish behind sold tags, just minutes after UPS scans the barcode. It is not frenzy. Customers arrive with cash and a list, leaving only if the store can't meet it. When the pistol shelf empties, they shift to optics. Holosun's DRS-TH Fusion sight, a red dot with an integral thermal sensor, sold out before its first SHOT press release went cold. Distributors that ordered 100 pieces in December now wish they'd signed for 1,000. The parts aisle looks just as lean. Mission First Tactical's new Acro chest rig, a streamlined 4-point harness, went through a full quarter's allocation in 6 weeks after backcountry hunters discovered they could carry a 10mm chest gun and a GPS without printing under a puffy jacket. Indoor ranges are seeing the downstream effect. Night classes fill by Tuesday, and instructors double up on live fire blocks because every student shows up with a fresh red dot that still needs zeroing. What flips ordinary consumer interest into a measurable surge is policy clarity. The Justice Department, under Attorney General Pam Bondi, just ditched the Biden-era zero-tolerance inspection regime that yanked licenses over transposed digits. Shop owners who survived those audits say they feel they have finally unclenched. They're restocking AR lowers, reordering suppressor demos, and adding gunsmith bays instead of skimping on inventory to build a legal defense fund. That confidence trickles down to the sales floor. Customers sense the pressure release and stop panic buying random SKUs. They upgrade instead, choosing a billet match receiver over a forged one because they believe the ATF won't reclassify it overnight. Trump's enforcement over expansion doctrine goes further. An executive order in February instructed every federal agency touching firearms to inventory rules that lack statutory authority. Overnight, the brace ban, ghost gun rule, and arbitrary parts definitions all landed back on the discussion table. Gun owners who lived through the whiplash of 2020 regulations know how quickly a redefinition can strand them with contraband. Today, they read the order, see a path to roll back, and pull the trigger on discretionary buys. Binary triggers, spare M16 bolt carriers, magnifiers, gear they once feared would end up in a gray zone. Suppressors capture the shift in miniature. Sales in 2024 were already up 80%. But paperwork bottlenecks kept many cans in limbo. This year, Washington talk turned to the Shush Act, a bill that would remove silencers from the National Firearms Act altogether and erase the $200 tax. The conversation might sound like political theater until you watch the Indiana hotel room security video making rounds on gun forums. A mother walks in on a convicted child predator assaulting her 12-year-old daughter, draws her carry pistol, and fires. She saves the child's life. Yet the report notes possible permanent hearing loss because the shot detonated inches from the girl's ear in a tight room. When that clip rolls on a shop TV, every parent in line nods toward the suppressor display. They're not chasing Hollywood stealth. They're preventing exactly that collateral damage. The anecdote has done more to normalize suppressors than a decade of marketing brochures. Ammunition shortages look different this time because the spike isn't driven solely by cheap brass cases. 5.56 and 9mm still disappear first, but boutique cartridges now ride the same wave. Hornadi's .338 ARC, designed for extended range AR-15 rifles and tuned for subsonic work behind a suppressor, sold out its launch batch in 24 hours on the major sites. Federal's 7mm back count, pitched to hunters who want flatter flight without stepping up to magnum recoil, saw the same fate. Every box was claimed before the pre-order window closed. Component buyers shadow the trend. Presses, shell plates, and primer trays move out the door because reloaders plan to feed these new calibers when retail shelves hiccup. Analysts following the small caliber segment estimate the market will nearly double from $6.76 billion in 2023 to $13.19 billion by 2031, a trajectory impossible without today's consumer appetite. Tariff noise complicates the calculus. Copper and lead imports now face duties that spook some wholesalers. Yet, the immediate retail effect is the opposite of what pundits predicted. Instead of shrinking orders, domestic manufacturers announce expansions to hedge against import costs. The bullets may cost a nickel more each, but shooters treat the premium as a down payment on independence from sketchy supply chains. State politics pour gasoline on the fire. Texas lawmakers just advanced a bill to ban government-funded gun buybacks, arguing the programs waste taxpayer money and funnel collectible firearms into shredders. Dealers along the I-35 corridor report a spike in trade-ins and consignment traffic because owners would rather turn an old shotgun into cash for a new optic than surrender it for a grocery store gift card. Across the country, Connecticut pressed ahead with a statute letting gun violence plaintiffs sue manufacturers for negligence if a dealer's product winds up in the wrong hands. Moments after the vote, social feeds in neighboring Rhode Island lit up with posts from collectors arranging group buys over the state line before the liability headaches scare off distributors. Federalism cuts both ways, and red state retailers are happy to pick up the slack. Inside those stores, the accessory wall looks like a grocery aisle before a hurricane. Weapon lights, 10-round speed loaders, compact IFAKs. Anything that completes a defensive loadout shows red stock tape on the computer. The surge isn't a frantic sweep. Shoppers compare lumen counts, weigh belt mounts against models, and still walk out with a polite fistful of gear. Even the niche items, tourniquets imported on NATO contracts or quick-detach sling adapters, register SHOT Show-level reorder velocity. Brands that weathered the 2020 roller coaster by trimming SKUs now scramble to add capacity back because demand has outrun the old normal. The consumer side of the ledger gets plenty of press, but the supplier side is where the story moves from interesting to seismic. Market Research Future pegs the broader guns and accessories sector at just under $8 billion today, with expectations it will push past $14 billion before the next presidential term is out, a compounded climb near 7% each year. Those gains hinge on a customer base that isn't simply reactive. Range rosters prove it. Monday night Pistol 101 once drew 20 middle-aged men. Now it's full of nurses, real estate agents, and college students. They arrive with the same rifles and pistols discussed earlier, but more striking is the notebook in every sling bag. Each new shooter is mapping drills, part times, and dry fire routines, because training no longer feels exotic. It feels like responsible citizenship. That cultural shift bleeds across demographic lines. Gun clubs in Metro Atlanta run women's defensive carbine nights that fill faster than 3 gun matches. In Tucson, the busiest day on the calendar is the Minority Shooters Meetup, sponsored by a local holster company that sees the potential in customers previously ignored by legacy marketing. Conversations around the bench run less about politics and more about which suppressor threads best on a PCC or which chest rig balances comfort against draw speed for a 5'2" frame. The Second Amendment hasn't changed words since 1791. Yet, its most ardent new defenders picked up their first firearm after the 2020 riots and then discovered the confidence of competence under a new administration that speaks openly about their rights instead of calling them fringe. National press still tries to frame the trend as an impending crisis. Columnists cite aggregate crime stats without breaking down where violence spikes and where it plummets. But raw FBI data betray the narrative. Counties with the highest increase in carry licenses often show robberies sliding to 20-year lows, even when property crimes and assaults climb in disarmed metros. The line graphs appear beside the register at more than one rural shop, laminated like a menu. Patrons read, nod, and order another case of self-defense hollow points the way they might stock pantry rice. Money flows along that new confidence curve. Venture capital that once shunned anything gun-related now competes for shares in defensive optic startups and niche ammunition makers gearing up to roll lead-free subsonic loads. Big box retailers who considered scrapping gun counters after 2020 quietly changed their mind when quarterly statements showed customers migrating to competitors for firearms and staying for camping and automotive departments. The boardrooms might speak in spreadsheets, but the floor staff recognized the human story. Ordinary citizens taking responsibility for their safety and pouring that mindset into local economies. Trump's policy hints remain the accelerant. If national reciprocity for concealed carry passes, a Kansas nurse on vacation in Times Square won't have to lock her sidearm in a hotel safe. She plans ahead for that possibility and buys a second holster molded for appendix carry under a summer blouse. When whispers spread that suppressors might leave the National Firearms Act, industrial design forums explode with renderings of integrally suppressed lever guns, betting the market will want heritage style without ear-splitting reports. If the ATF merges into Treasury and loses rule by blog post authority, parts designers dust off delayed blowback prototypes and prep for production. Without fear, they'll wind up facing felony charges over a shoulder stock. Meanwhile, small stories continue to humanize the statistics. A hardware store owner in South Carolina, who never closed during the pandemic, has started stocking 8 Station Progressive presses because customers kept asking if he could special order them. A teenage girl who survived an attempted carjacking last year now teaches an introductory safety class for her high school peers under the mentorship of the town's police chief. Those anecdotes rarely hit wire services, but they illustrate the tectonic shift behind the raw numbers. Americans are weaving armed preparedness into ordinary life, not as a fringe for doomsday preppers, but as a mainstream expectation on par with car insurance. The legislative tug-of-war continues. Of course, Connecticut's lawsuit path against manufacturers now competes in the headlines with Texas's buyback ban and Florida's push to forbid permanent registries. Each headline triggers its own microspike in sales where citizens fear being caught in the crossfire of politics. Yet, the broad arc bends toward markets opening, not tightening. As manufacturers add domestic capacity to blunt tariff costs and accessory innovators chase fresh segments, the single biggest obstacle remains simple production speed. When suppressor deregulation looks plausible and training demand doubles, the lead time on a titanium tube or a quality Kydex rig becomes the choke point. Investors see that bottleneck and line up term sheets. Put it all together. Revived lever gun shipments, wheel gun nostalgia colliding with modern carry doctrine, suppressor sales outpacing factory tooling, boutique ammunition launches that sell out by dinner time, and a consumer class determined to train harder than the last generation. And you get a retail landscape unlike anything since the post-war boom. The numbers back the gut feeling. Billions in projected growth, millions of new background checks, and a product ecosystem that's broader, smarter, and more resilient than the one that panicked its way through the pandemic. None of this energy comes from fear of a ban. It comes from confidence that the federal government has finally switched the safety to respect rather than restrict. People spend differently when they believe tomorrow's rules won't turn them into overnight felons. They go deeper. They buy quality. They build redundancies. They show up for class. They bring friends. And that's a wrap. What's the first piece of gear or ammo you'd grab in this market? Have you noticed changes at your local shop or online? Let us know in the comments. And if you're with us on this Second Amendment momentum ride, hit like, share the video, subscribe, and ring that bell because the surge isn't slowing down anytime soon.